Good. I
On
want
set, quiet on set.
yeah, quiet on set, roll sound, slate. We do that kind of stuff, right? Are you a film major, remind me? Or are you just taking film?
I mean, I have experience with film because my director for theater in
Yeah.
high school, he was familiar with it.
Good.
So
This is sign-in sheet, remember? I'm gonna try to be a little more consistent on that. There will be quizzes on the class lectures. That's how I'm keeping those who are doing this remotely accountable to going to class, right? And so I'm gonna pull out, some of the questions are not necessarily gonna be about U.S. Texas government. Some are gonna be little trick questions saying, you know, check to see if you paid attention, if you actually watched the video, okay? Or if you're actually here, it'll be easier, right? Great thing about being here is you get to take the notes and then you can refer back to the video if necessary. But the point being here is there'll be, the idea of this is to keep us accountable to attendance, because that is where you're going to, one, learn if you are able to learn remotely, if it is possible, and two, that's how you will succeed in the class if you are to do this, okay? I mean, actually pay attention, and so that's a big deal. So I'm, test question, am I paying attention to attendance? The answer is yes, I'm actually having you sign in. There should be more people here. The only people who should not be here should have excuses and should have given them to me. Those are excuses I have not yet received.
think they slept in.
No, I think what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the remote situation, and I think that they are acting as if we are operating as though we did last semester, where it was kind of, if you want to come, come. If you don't want to come, don't. Do it remotely and nobody's paying attention. This semester, everybody was supposed to attend unless you had a specific excuse, and that had to go through a physician. Now, it doesn't really hurt me at all, but it does hurt you to not come. The reason you go to school is to learn, right? I know you want a degree, but the degree represents what? The fact that you were taught something, that you gained this skill that set this new knowledge. And some people, like I got a friend right now, he's still going to college, and he's like, oh God, I hate this. I just want to get it done. And I'm like, what'd you learn? He's like, what does it matter? Well, then why are you going to school, right? If it doesn't represent, if you didn't learn anything, then your degree is really worthless. You're just paying for a fancy sheet of paper. Okay, so I'm encouraging you to suck the class dry and ask for more, okay? Because you want to come out of here more intelligent than you started. You certainly don't want to come out equally as intelligent as you started, because then you just wasted your money. You should ask for your money back. You should be able to speak to things that you were not able to speak to before you came to these classes. Now, everybody is a philosopher. Very few of us are good philosophers. Every one of us is a citizen somewhere, unless you are exiled from your country and you are a man or a woman without a country. And I highly doubt I have any of those in my class. So as philosophers and as citizens, as philosophers, we ask, what's the best regime? What is moral? What is just? What is right? What is virtuous? How do we obtain happiness? Right? Okay? The Bible says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Okay? And then we enter into societies. Aristotle says man is political by nature. That is, we are animals in a sense that we gather. We are rational animals. We reason towards happiness and virtue and happiness, and we gather with one another and we ask the question, how should we then live? And we devise political bonds with one another, we devise governments, and we end up talking about things like rights. We talked about the natural ends of man. What type of thing is man? Man is a reasoning thing, a rational being. That's what we do. What do we reason towards? Virtue and happiness, all right? This idea, the eyes are for sight, the ears are for hearing. What is the human for? For reason, for happiness, for virtue. And so when we get to the American form of government, and we've talked about the principles of our government, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those principles today. But then we devise a constitution based off the principles. I should say based on the principles. You start with the principles. Why are we writing this constitution? To protect or secure the rights of man that exist prior to the Constitution. You understand, a lot of people ask if Texas can secede from the Union, right? And constitutional scholars say, the Constitution doesn't allow it. Right, well, if you ask King George if the colonies could declare their independence from England, I'm pretty sure he'd say that that would not be allowed according to their government, right? So legally, no. But I mean, I think the Declaration of Independence showed that some colonies could declare their independence, become their own country, and in the same manner, I can guarantee Texas could tell, the rest of the United States, we're taking our ball and we're going home, all right? And then, of course, it's up to the United States. You draw the line in the sand, you say, what are you going to do about it? And of course, if the United States wants to invade Texas, quite possible. There could be another war, okay? I mean, clearly the southern states seceded, and they had to get re-annexed. So anyway, point being is we have these principles that started before the Constitution, okay? And these states had to come into an agreement under, with this Constitution that we wrote. And good morning. Come on through, please. Do me a favor. Sign in, and then just hand it back to me.
Thank you.
No problem, thank you. So, key fact, principles exist before the Constitution. Did you catch that? The principles existed before the Constitution, and then the states had to ratify the Constitution, saying, yeah, all right, we'll give up some of our sovereignty, which is sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Self-rule, okay? We will give up our self-rule to enter into this pact under this Constitution with you, right? Because we believe that it sufficiently will secure the rights of man, that it will actually uphold the principles of which we speak, that we hold dearly. And in as much as it does that, we're going to remain in this pact with you, all right? Now, I wish it was that easy, but it was not that easy, okay? And there were certain things that got in the way that, you get all these colonies, now states. You get these guys and you say, look, we're going to put, get a constitution here, and we want you to be on board with it, give up some of your sovereignty. And some of these guys are like, no, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. Why? Well, there are certain reasons, and these problems still exist today and are being, they're fought over right now. Major fights over this, especially during election year, okay? One of the major fights over this was representation. Some of the states have more people than others, okay? And so what happens when one state has more people than others and a constitution says you will have representation based on the population of your state. And you get places, just with huge populations, and you get places with small populations. What is the state with the small population thinking? They're going to have less representatives than the big state. And they're going to go, okay, we're going to go into this constitution. They're going to have more representatives than we are. What do they do? Are they going to, would you enter into this?
Like be part of the small population, or like?
Yeah, if you're a smaller state, and you realize that if I enter into this constitution under one federal government, and our state has less people than, let's say, New York, okay? And Rhode Island, New York, okay? One has a lot, one has a little. Are you going to want to enter that pact? You guys are your own boss right now. You're your own boss. You're sovereign. It's like your own little country. Now you're going to go to a big country and you're going to give up some of your sovereignty. You don't want to do that, do you? No, you don't. Neither did they. And why? Because these big states can run over the smaller states. And so what ends up here, and this is why this last election and the future elections of the United States of America are very, they're being hotly debated, and right now it's getting a little scary. Okay, so what they let's go backwards. What they did is they created a compromise called the Great Compromise. Okay, and the Great Compromise, can anybody tell me what that is? It has to do with the creation of a bicameral legislature. At this time, there was the idea of a unicameral legislature, that there would be a legislative body based off the population of the states. But the smaller states realized that they'd be underrepresented, and they would be at the mercy of the majority. They'd be at the mercy, the tyranny of the majority, right? The bigger states would overrule them in everything, and they would lose all their power of equal representation. So what did they do? They came up with a bicameral system. 2 chambers of the legislative body. One body, the lower chamber, is known as the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives is based off of population. Currently, we have 435 members in the House of Representatives in the United States of America. Who is your representative? Do you know who yours is? Do you know where you live?
Harris County.
You live in Harris County. That's a big county. There's more than one representative there. Okay? Green is one. Sheila Jackson Lee is another. She's got a really big stranglehold on a particular district. She'll never be ousted because of the way it was gerrymandered. Mine is Lizzie Fletcher, right? Fletcher. I think it's Fletcher. Anyway, I didn't vote for her. She beat out an incumbent, and this is her second term, okay? But currently, there are 435 members. Dan Crenshaw is in Texas. You know who he is? He's the guy with one eye, the Cyclops. Yeah, has a patch, looks like a pirate. Arr. Okay. Okay. Let's start paying attention. Let's start seeing these guys around. You go, oh, I know that guy. He's part of the House of Representatives. How many are there? There's 435, and is based off of population. Back then, there was not that many. Okay, but as the population grew in America, so too did the size of the House of Representatives. But the other house, not chamber, not the house, the other chamber is known as the upper chamber. And this is called the Senate. And the Senate was created to create equal representation. It was a compromise. In one sense, it was unequally represented because of the population. New York, right, has more people, therefore they get more representation in the House. Now, of course, what if they only had the Senate? How many people are in the Senate? The Senate's there to create some sense of equality amongst states, equality amongst states, okay? And there are 2 senators per state, all right? 2 senators per state. Can you name the 2 senators of the great, or can you name 2 senators at all? Anybody? This is very important. These are the people making decisions in your lives. It is very important, Plato said, that you should, in fact, I wrote this quote down yesterday. Listen to this quote. I want to do it justice. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. Did you hear that back there? One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. We can apply that to all sorts of things, okay? If you don't get involved, those who will get involved will rule over you. And unfortunately, much of the time, these people are not as wise as they should be. Okay, so I encourage you at this point in your lives, I know at this point in your lives you're probably going, I'm in college, I want to just get a job, find a husband or a wife, get married, right? This is stuff going on in your mind right now. You might even not be thinking so far ahead as for a husband and wife, but I promise you, it's a lot closer at your age right now than it was 2 years ago. And so those are good thoughts. But once you start having families and you start going to schools and you start paying taxes and you start going, I don't like what's happening here in this country, or I want this to happen, I don't want them to take it away, then you're going to start getting interested in this stuff. You're going to find out, who do I talk to change this? And that ends up being in, first you got your state, you got your city council, you got your state representatives, then you've got your state senators, and then you've got your federal congressmen, the House of Representatives we're talking about, and then you've got your federal senators. It's important to know what they do and who they are. Okay? In my case, contacting my House member is virtually worthless because she's in the other party. She's not going to do anything I want her to do, right? But I could annoy her and fill up her email box. I guess that might help. Hey, I want you to vote pro-life. Ha! You ain't going to happen. Okay? But it is important to know that. Okay? So who are our senators in the great state of Texas? Ted Cruz. Anybody heard of Ted Cruz? Okay. And John Cornyn. John Cornyn. Okay. What political party do they represent? What 2 political parties are the major political parties in America?
Republican and Democrat.
Republican and Democrat. At this point, Texas is pretty solidly a red state. What does that mean?
Republican.
Well, yeah, it's the majority of us are Republican, okay? And that's reflected in our representation, okay? Not in Harris County. You go into the major cities of America, conservatives they don't really have the voice, okay? And so conservatives don't have the blame, right? You can't blame conservatives if they're not the bosses, right? You can't blame liberals if they're not the bosses. So whoever's in charge needs to take, like I had to blame somebody yesterday I didn't want to blame first politically. I'm like, oh, did that person do that? Huh, well, that's not cool. And I didn't want to blame them, but blame goes where blame goes, right? All right. So why did they do this? Because there was a need to say to the smaller states, you have equal representation amongst the other states. Keep in mind, these are states. The states need to maintain some semblance of sovereignty, some semblance of self-rule, and they don't want the majority tyrannizing them. So what do? They devise a Senate. But here's the opposite thing. The House of Representatives also helps the majority of people from being tyrannized by the minority. Why should we do what you say? There's only a few of you, and there's, look how many of us. And you're ruling over us. That's tyranny of the minority. So the compromise was a bicameral legislative branch where there's equal representation in the Senate and unequal representation in the House. It causes some difficulty in passing legislation, making new laws. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Government can be highly inefficient. The more parts you put into it, the less efficient it is. And that can be a good thing. Because the Constitution was created to limit the powers of the government. Does that make sense? It's not to limit your powers. It was there to secure your rights. Your rights have to do with liberty. And if it is destructive towards those ends of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we need to do what? Alter, change it, or abolish it. A lot of people want to abolish it right now. Why do they want to abolish it? Because they do not believe in the principles. They believe our Constitution was made by slave owners, for slave owners. It was made by racists, and thus our system is racist. And thus, to get out of racism, we need to just tear up the Constitution and start over. And they disagree with the founding principles that the founding fathers set forth. I would caution against those beliefs. Because once you throw out the idea that God exists, once you throw out the idea that all men are created equal, okay? Once you throw that out, you've got no foundation for rights. You cannot claim rights. All you can do is use power. And once that happens, whoever has the majority has the power. And whoever has the power can tyrannize the minority. And there are no principles to which one can appeal. Okay? So, they create this is called the Great Compromise. All right? There's another compromise that had to take place. And this goes to what I just said. It's called the 3/5 Compromise. It's a very important one. And both of these, by the way, that I'm mentioning right now, the Great Compromise and the 3/5 Compromise, are very important to our current political situation today. Can somebody tell me what the 3/5 Compromise is? Okay. The 3/5 Compromise. When they said these states were going to come into the Union or not be in the Union, there were states that were slave-owning states. From the second America started its founding, the question of when, not if, when we were going to end slavery was the question. There are reasons for that. First of all, they were recognizing the immorality of it. And they recognized the tension between the words of the Declaration of Independence and the rights of man with their practices. Jefferson himself owned slaves, and allegedly and probably did, once his wife died, had a girlfriend, and she was, they never married, but she was a slave. She was a black woman and a slave, and he loved her and had children with her. Okay? Now people go, oh, that's so. There's a big debate at Thomas Jefferson's home called Monticello, where people go visit the former president's house, whether or not the descendants of this woman should be allowed to be buried on the property of Monticello. And because they're not, quote, legitimate children through his first wife, they're like, no, he wasn't married to her. We don't even, and they kind of deny, and there's this fight, and there's a fight over it, a real fight. I'm not part of it, but I know people who are, okay, because I'm married into that family, okay. My wife is a descendant of Thomas Jefferson, and her brother's on the board of Monticello, so I'm a little privy to this. Well, anyway, point being, there's a big fight still to this day over that issue. Well, anyway, the question is, slave states, the states that did own slaves, they're like, okay, we want representation. We want to count the people who live on our land, who are our property, right? Slaves, to be counted as citizens in order to get more people in the House of Representatives. Okay? The northern states are saying no. Why did they say no? Well, they said no because they're not going to allow these slaves to vote. These slaves are not enjoying the freedoms and liberties that are supposedly secured by our Constitution. So they're like, wait a minute, you might as well have your cat represented, because that gives you more representatives. Because you're the one making the choices, not your slave. Your slave may have something else in mind, and they're not represented. You get to vote for them, right? And they said, well, guess what? You don't let us use our slaves as representatives. We're going to take our ball and go home, and we're not going to sign on to this Constitution. And the Northerners are like, man, we need to get this thing signed. The place is falling apart. Articles of Confederation don't work. So they came up with a compromise called the Three-Fifths Compromise. And they said, all right, for every 5 slaves you have, we will count them as 3 white men. Okay? So you get, for 5 black men, you get the representation of 3 white men. And they said, that's pretty good because, quite frankly, they're not voting anyways. It's just like extra votes. So this is the Three-Fifths Compromise. Now, of course, that's gone now, okay? Because all slaves are freed. All black men and women are counted in the census as long as you're citizens. Now, let's talk about how these 2 issues are still important to this day. In 2016, Donald John Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. And people freaked out. Who freaked out the most? The people from California and the people from New York. Why? Because, well, yeah, they're blue states for sure. Texas wasn't going, oh, this stinks. No, we voted for him, okay? It's because Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. She got more votes than Donald Trump got as a total. But Donald J. Trump beat her in the Electoral College. See, the Electoral College is there to maintain, in elections, in presidential elections, you don't win by getting more votes in the nation. You win by getting more votes from the states. You're trying to win the states. Okay? So if I'm running for president, how do I win? I win by winning the great state of Texas, which will give me a bunch of electoral college votes. I just need to win those. And then I go to other states to collect 270 of these things so that I win. Okay? So you're trying to win the states. People have to understand that we're not trying to win the individuals. We're trying to win the states. We win the states by winning the individuals. You could win, look, you could literally, it doesn't even matter. California, you could have 99% of all Californians vote for the other person, right? It doesn't matter. Or 51%, it doesn't matter. The same number of electoral votes come from California, no matter what the margin of victory is. It's all or nothing, okay? There's only a couple states that don't give all of their, that don't do it that way. After Hillary Clinton lost, there was this cry to get rid of the Electoral College. Okay? There was a cry to get rid of the Electoral College. Why? Because the smaller states ended up handing the victory to Donald J. Trump. And they didn't like that. But that is exactly why that's exactly why the Electoral College works, is to give representation so that California and New York do not rule over the lives of the middle of the country. That tyranny of the majority. Go ahead, sir. Yeah, so the popular vote, the popular vote, if you're going to win Texas, you got to win the popular vote. You got to win more votes on your side than we do on my side, or whatever, however that works. Your opposition. And that's how you win the state of Texas. So while you want your side to win California or whatever, or, your job isn't California. Your job is to win Texas. Okay? You're a Texas citizen. Does that make sense? Because you're worried about your electoral college votes. Is your side going to win the electoral college? Are you going to be able to send your electors, right, to cast the votes for your choice? And it's state by state, okay? And it is to prevent New York. Think about Montana, okay? What would this do to Montana if you got rid of the electoral college? Or imagine getting rid of the Senate. That was another thing people were saying. These smaller states are, unevenly represented. Why should we let them have 2 senators? Right? What would that do to Montana? That would mean they're at the whims of these huge states. Why would you want to be in a country where you have no say? Go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
How can, if you get more popular votes in that state, how can you still lose?
Well, they won their electors. They won the state. So in California, they got way more votes than Donald Trump, and so they got to cast their votes for Hillary Clinton. Okay? But Trump won Texas, Trump won Ohio, Trump won Florida, Trump won all these states that traditionally go Democrat. Okay, and he got all their electoral college votes. She didn't get those votes. She got New York. She got Connecticut, I think. She got California. She got all the traditional extremely left-wing states. Oregon and Washington and New Mexico and Colorado. But you got to understand, he won the electoral college votes by winning more of those, because he won the states. California just has so many people that when you take all their votes, they have more votes than the rest of us. And so many people there. And New York as well. Okay, so you could lose the popular vote because you lost California and New York, but you could still win the electoral college. And it was set up that way because you're competing for states, not competing for individuals. Go ahead.
So Donald Trump won more states than Hillary Clinton.
That's correct.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, this was a record year, and this is why a lot of people are so up in arms about it. Donald Trump got more votes than any previous president this year. 75 million votes. Blew away what had been done in the past. And he was doing 3-4 rallies a day. Joe Biden didn't go out of his basement at all, and that was a big criticism. They were like, he won't leave his basement, he won't leave his basement. Literally did not campaign at all. If you went to a rally, there'd be 5 of you in a circle spread out, right? Nobody shows. And somehow he got 80 million votes. And all of a sudden these guys are going, oh, wait a minute. So there's a big, people are like, how on earth did Sleepy Joe Biden, that's what they call him, Sleepy Joe Biden get way more votes than Barack Obama? Way more, come on. Now, of course, I'm cynical, okay? I'm a little untrusting, okay? But I believe Barack Obama got more votes than Joe Biden, all right? Okay, I just happen to be a little less than trusting on that. Sounds like we got some thunder going on out there.
It's icy.
What's that?
It was icy outside.
Was it?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't want to be driving on that. It's very dangerous, especially with my tires right now because they're not, I've put off changing them. All right, we talked about the Great Compromise, the 3/5 Compromise. Oh, why is the 3/5 Compromise? How does that reflect in today's land? Okay, political climate. Right now there's a big debate over immigration. Okay, what is going on with our debate in immigration? that's going to be literally a reflection of the Three-Fifths Compromise. And in my opinion, it's worse. All right, so we have to do a census in America. Why do we do censuses? To determine the population. Why do we determine the population? To determine representation, right? On the census, President Donald J. Trump wanted to ask, are you a citizen? Yes or no? Why is that important? It's important for legal representation because if you pour in millions of illegal immigrants who cannot vote, and you count them, let's say in California or Texas or Arizona or New Mexico, and you count them in your census for representation, that means that state gets more representatives. And if they get more and they can gerrymander things, which is the switching of lines. If you get all these people represented now, you get more representation in your state. But these people, like the slaves, they're not being represented because they have no say. They are being used merely to gain political power. Okay? And unlike the slaves, they're not even counted as 3/5. They're counted as 0 as far as their vote. They're counted 100%, but they are literally getting 0% representation. Because they can't vote. You get more representatives, but the immigrants get no votes. And so it's very similar to what was going on. So now the question is, should they be counted in the census? The states that don't have problems with the southern border immigration, they're like, hold on here. That's not right. Why? And in fact, political parties are saying don't do it because we know that when you bring these people in, their children, if they're naturalized, they're going to vote for you. You're stacking the deck against us. It is a political maneuver to gain power. And it is at the expense of those who are not represented. Does that make sense? So there are a lot of people who are saying, yeah, bring them all in, because you know why? And then give them amnesty, let them become citizens or and people who could be counted in a census. We get more political representation, and even if they do get the chance to vote, we know that they are probably going to vote for us. It's a very cynical way of doing it, and I don't like it. Okay, because it's about power, it's not about representation. So this is a major issue that's going on in America today over representation and power. And it is very similar to that which was going on during the Three-Fifths Compromise over, the slaves. We want to count them as representation, people to be represented, but we don't want to allow them to have a say in who gets to represent them. All right, very good. All right, so the Constitution finally gets ratified. Let's talk a bit about it. Through my foggy glasses. All right, started out with an attempt to discuss the Articles of Confederation, and only 12 people showed up representing 5 states. They called for a meeting in May of not 1987, but 1787. 1987, I was at Sandia High School as a junior. They did so to discuss the changes known as the Constitutional Convention. At this convention, this Philadelphia Convention, the school eventually is going to build a building that is a replica of Constitution Hall, Independence Hall, where the Constitution was signed and all that. And this school is going to have that. It's going to be bigger than that. So, but it's going to be a replica, and we're going to move the political science department into it eventually. Anyways, 55 men from 12 of the 13 states showed up. Rhode Island was the one who didn't want to show up. One of the reasons Rhode Island didn't want to show up because they assumed that the states were all going to grow westward. And so as the states, as they expanded into, western, western United States, the states would grow as they expanded, right? Rhode Island's like, hey man, we're landlocked here. We're like, everybody is like around us and they're gonna grow and we're like stuck here. Like, we don't want to do this, that's not cool. So of course other, conversations had to happen about that. Anyways, most of these people were wealthy. That is, they had obtained some level of success. They were planters, merchants, college graduates, or lots of college graduates. There were pastors, okay? People who thought religiously to put input into this. They were coastal residents from the larger cities. The father of the Constitution is known as James Madison. Who's the father of the Constitution? James Madison. We're going to discuss those quickly. We're going to go through the 5 principles we discussed the other day. The 5 principles of this Constitution was popular sovereignty. That is, that the rule of the people provides legitimacy for the government. The government doesn't provide legitimacy for the people. It is the other way around, the consent of the governed. Second, limited government. That government's reach is bound by the Constitution, by the principles contained therein. It is the Constitution that needs to have powers given to it, not the people. The Constitution doesn't tell us what we can do. It tells us, it tells the government what it cannot do. That's at least the attempt of it. Unfortunately, our attempt to... Now, there's a big debate in government. How big should the government be? Should it be big or small? The smaller it is, the less control it has over you, right? The bigger it is, the more control it has over you. What do laws do? They tell you what to do, what not to do. What do they do? What do governments do when they get their hands on something? They govern it. You just catch that? When they govern it, that means they're telling you what to do or what not to do. You make a law, you've just limited your own liberty, okay? You've given up a bit of your own sovereignty. Every law, every time you say, I want the government to provide school. If government provides school, government governs school. Okay? I'm part of the VA system, meaning I'm a United States veteran. I go to the Veterans Hospital. They give me health care. You know what happens when the government provides health care? They govern health care. And when the government governs health care, they tell me who I can see. Not, okay, who I can't see. If I provide it, I tell me. But when the government does it, the government does it. Okay, governs it. So limited government was one of the five principles. I don't find that principle being exemplified today by any political party. Federalism. This is a system that allowed the government to share powers with the states. All right? Each level has its own responsibility. We discussed this the other day. 3 or 4, this is 4. Separation of powers. The different branches of government have different but equal powers. Different but equal powers. I don't think we mentioned this the other day. I just assumed it. I got to tell you this. Every government has 3 branches of government. I did tell you. One is the legislative branch. The legislative branch does what? Legislates. It makes, go ahead, say it. Laws. Yeah. It makes laws. Okay. It has a few other powers too, and we're going to discuss that today, given the time. The executive branch. What does the executive branch do? It executes the laws. Does the executive branch make the laws? Can Joe Biden make a law? Yeah. Can he?
No.
He writes all these things called executive orders. Are those laws? No. No, but it is odd. That is borderline abuse of power. Especially the vast number that these presidents, and I'm not just including him, I'm going to go way back, okay? That the president, because the executive branch of the judicial branch, they butt heads. and they need to check each other's power to say, you are overstepping. And the legislative branch, if they were doing their job, would say, I think you're overstepping your bounds here by writing all these executive orders. The problem is some of them like the executive orders and just wish that those bills could pass into law, but they can't. So they go, just do an executive order. All right? But some would argue that's an abuse of the executive authority. Okay? But you're not supposed to. That's the idea. They execute the law, they do not make the law. All right? Finally, the judicial branch does what? Yeah, it judges the constitutionality of the law, and it also judges whether or not you broke it or not, upheld it. You have civil cases and you have criminal cases, right? And so there were, but constitutional cases we're talking about. All right. All right. Finally, checks and balances. That each branch of government has a check on the other. So, if the legislative branch passes a law that the president doesn't like, he can veto it, right? It says no to it. And we're going to talk about the veto power and how that works. We're going to talk about the creational laws and how that works. But then finally, the judicial branch could sit there, even if the president signs into law, the judicial branch can literally say this is an unconstitutional law because it is violating constitutional principles. And by the way, that's what's going on right now. They're asking the question, the president's being impeached. And they're asking the question, where's the court to decide whether this impeachment or not is constitutional? Yes?
How can a president be impeached twice?
As many times as they want to impeach you.
But
Not for a different, it's like, how can you be arrested twice? Well, you can be arrested twice for two different crimes. Right? At two different crimes at two different times. The question is, did he commit a crime? A high crime and misdemeanor. The goal is for them to prove not to. They're gonna lose. They're not gonna win. We're gonna talk about it in a second. The House has the sole power of impeachment. The trial goes through the Senate. You need 2/3 of the Senate to convict. You're not gonna get it. It's dead in the water. They already knew it. Because this isn't a criminal court. This isn't about evidence. And because it's not about evidence, the Democrats went out and they got a Hollywood company, and I know how they did this, to edit all this film to make what happened that day, that little riot that took place. They make it look so bad, and that Donald Trump is all Heil Hitlering, and not really. I'm being hyperbolic, but if you watch the videos, you'd be like, oh my God, let's put this guy in chains now. Never let him out, right? But a criminal court would never allow that. You have to see context. You can't just edit these things to make them look so bad. Well, anyways, that's how politically divided we are right now, right? Well, anyway, these are big debates, though, over the constitutionality of something. Checks and balances should come into play here, right? In fact, if I were Joe Biden, the president, I'd say, hey, settle down, guys, because what they do to President Trump can easily be done to Joe Biden. What is done to the Republicans can easily be done to the Democrats. You don't want to open that can of worms, but they're gonna open the can of worms. Okay? All right, so one of the things I wanted to go back. I forgot to mention something about the Senate. One of the things that's going on, debates going on right now, is this desire to add 2 more states to our union, Puerto Rico, and turn D.C. into a state. Why do the Democrats want to do that? Because they know that they are primarily Democrat voters, and if they turn them into these states, if they turn these territories into states, they know that they'll get 4 senators, right? Each state gets 2 senators. How many states do we have right now? 50. Okay. How many senators does that make the U.S. have? 100. So if we had 2 more states, we'd have 104 senators, and those new 4 senators would most assuredly be Democrat. So why do they want to add? Power. To get more representation in the upper chamber. Pure power. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, It can happen on both sides. They also want to add to the judicial branch. They also want to add more Supreme Court justices because of the way they theorize the judicial branches. Why? Because they're afraid Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned by the current court. What is Roe versus Wade? Abortion. The legal right to have an abortion. They're afraid that that will be overturned by the court. All right. All right, so we talked about the legislative branch. This is in Article 1 of the Constitution. I brought my book on the Constitution with me. Did you bring yours? Did you bring yours? It's okay. I'm going to read just a little bit about it, then we give you certain statements about it. Here we go. Article 1, Section 1. All legislative, some legislative or what? A little legislative? All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year. How often are the House of Representatives chosen? Every second year means every 2 years, right? We just had an election. 2 years from now, there'll be another election, 2 years from November. If you want to run for the House of Representatives, you better get going now. Start getting your act together, okay? You got to pay a fee. I think you need some signatures. Then you got to call your campaign manager. And those guys are like in Austin. They're in demand. They cost a lot of money. You got to get your donors. You got to go around and get your push cards. Go knocking on doors. Okay. Or you got to move somewhere where you are uncontested, like this guy I know. All right. Members shall be chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and electors in each state shall have the qualification requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. No person shall be a representative who shall not have obtained the age of 25 years old. How many of you in here can run for a house right now? How close are you?
Pretty far.
How old are you?
18, almost 19.
Wow, you got all 6 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay, pretty close?
20.
5 years. 19. Get started thinking about this stuff. Remember, if you choose not to participate, then you will inevitably be ruled by those less capable, right? All right, 25 years, and you have to be a citizen for 7 years. All right, and you have to be, upon being elected, be an inhabitant of that state. Now, there's a way around that, unfortunately. A lot of these people have resident in that state, and then they just go take off and live in D.C. Not cool. All right. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons. There it is, right there. Including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. You hear the racism right there. The depersonalization of several million people, right? In the Constitution. Not to blow, look, the Constitution was amended, right? What does it mean to amend? To change, or to, what's the other word? Alter. Okay? This is null and void now, this 3/5 part. Why? Because it was destructive towards the ends of man. Does that make sense? What is it? It is there to secure the rights of man, and this did not do it. So what did they do? They altered it. If that didn't work, what would the next step be? Thank you for saying that. All right, the rest is a timeline, okay? When vacancies happen in the representation from any state, say somebody dies, for example, there's a Texas representative who just died recently, okay? What do? Oh my gosh. All right? The executive authority therein, who would be the executive authority therein? In our case, it'd be our governor. Who's our governor in the great state of Texas? Oh, you gotta be kidding me, guys. Rides around in a wheelchair? Greg Abbott. Okay. Shall fill, okay? Shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. The House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. That is it. What is exactly going on right now? So, did the whole House of Representatives impeach Donald Trump? No. The Democrats, who have the majority, voted to impeach Donald Trump. And they came up with this charge of inciting insurrection. All right? So there's a big melee at the Capitol right during, well, Donald Trump is giving a speech 7 minutes away, okay? And they said he incited that. Now we're going to charge him with that. And we're going to try to keep him from being in office. Ever again. Let this be a message to you people out there who like him. Speak up too loudly, and you guys can be quashed too. Now, it goes over to the Senate. The Senate tries it. I just told you that, right? But the sole power, the only power to impeach, to charge a president or otherwise, like we could impeach other elected officials. Why would you want to impeach an elected official? What does that mean? It means to charge, but if they are found guilty, what do you do with them? You kill them. No. You just remove them from office. And they will no longer be able to hold office ever again. You've basically politically given them the death sentence. You will no longer have the ability to participate in the ruling class of America. And that is what they are trying to do to Donald Trump right now. We don't like you, so we are going to impeach you, and if we could get 66 members of the Senate to agree with us, we will keep you from ever being voted into office again. You will not even be able to be elected for dog catcher. Okay? Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about the House before we go on to the Senate. We're not going to have time to go to the Senate. Maybe we will, but we're not going to. All right. They're elected every 2 years. You have to be 25 years old. You have to live in the state, right, that you are representing. You obviously have to be a citizen, but you have to be a resident of the state for at least 7 years. You were chosen by the population. The majority, the way the hierarchy of our nation goes, it goes, number one is the president. If the president dies, who goes into power? The vice president. If the vice president dies, who goes into power or gets removed? Who gets into power? The Speaker of the House. Why? Because the vice president is the president of the Senate, right? He's in charge of the Senate. That's why it goes executive, Senate, and then Congress, right? The House of Representatives. So who would be, right? So how do you determine who the Speaker of the House is? The Speaker of the House is the leader of the majority in the House of Representatives. Who's in the majority right now in the House of Representatives between the parties? Republicans or Democrats? Democrats. You don't. Republicans are surely not impeaching their own president, right? Okay, so they elect their own speaker, their own representative, and that is Nancy Pelosi, and she's held it since John Boehner, if I'm correct. Who was no, it was, I forget the guy's name.
Is there somebody named Ryan or something?
Yeah, Paul Ryan, that's him. It was Paul Ryan. And Paul Ryan is persona non grata in the Republican Party right now. He's known as what's called a rhino, a Republican in name only. Okay, so and Mitt Romney, they're a bunch of these Republicans who really hate Trump. Okay, and they're really best suited to be in the Democratic Party, but they run as Republicans, so they call them rhinos, Republican in name only. And Paul Ryan's one of them. So he's not the Republicans are not a big fan of Paul Ryan right now. All right, so there are 435 members in the House right now. 6 states there are 6 states with only 1 member in the House of Representatives. Imagine how many representatives, I don't know, it's something I'll come up with, or you guys can. How many representatives does California have? And something tells me it's like 56 or something like that. How many does Texas have? We have something like 30 something. Okay? How many does New York have? Right? Lots. But there are 6 states that have only 1 member in the House of Representatives, but they have 2 in the Senate. So if you imagine California with their 50-something House members, and then they only get 2 in the Senate. It's like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, right? Delaware, Idaho, I think maybe. No, Alaska. They actually get unequal representation in the Senate. They have more power in the Senate than they do in the House of Representatives. That's a lot of power. Okay? So you can imagine why these big states like California and New York want to get rid of the Senate. They're like, man, these guys have as much power as we do. But you can imagine why they want to keep it. Because if they don't, they'd be run over by New York and by California. And there would be, and that's really kind of the way it is anyway. That's really what they want. They want the 2 coasts to rule inner America. But do we have different issues going on? And the answer is yeah, we have different interests. Okay, anyway, let me see. No, I think that's what we got. That's some pretty good stuff, and I think we got 5 minutes left. Are there any questions that I can get from you? Did you learn anything today? What did you learn today?
But there's 435 members in the House of Representatives.
Very cool. Very good. That's very good. How about you, Leigh?
I wrote a lot of stuff down.
You sure did. I love, by the way, I have my iPad and I love those iPens. Aren't they cool? They write so much better than a normal pencil. You screw up and you're like, okay, go ahead. What'd you learn?
Kind of just like the election process. What you were saying about like electoral votes. Like,
Yeah, it was designed for protection of the smaller states and all that too. Yeah. And state sovereignty. It's kind of designed around that. Yeah. So it's important. So when people go, well, we got to get rid of this, you go, well, maybe we shouldn't, because I'm a Texan. I don't want to do, and I lived in California. I promise. You get rid of the Electoral College, I can promise you this: this state will be run as though it is California, or New York. And us here in Texas going, well, we don't like those guys. I'm from there, so I kind of like them. You're from there, Inglewood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a cool place.
Yeah.
They're not going to import their weather, are they?
No.
They're going to import their taxes. Do you like paying taxes? Who does, right?
No.
Yeah, nobody
They're
does.
higher in California.
Huh?
They're higher in California.
You better believe it, and they're even higher in New York. Okay? What'd you learn today?
How the 3-phase compromise is like kind of relating back to today with immigration and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't go away, this idea of treating persons as non-persons, but still wanting their representation. And it's kind of hard. I don't think it's pretty, it's a blemish. Go ahead.
How how what's it called abuse of powers is really relevant and like prevalent around like what we're doing today.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I had no idea, and I was like, wow.
There's an abuse of powers all throughout the board here. Look, in the judicial branch, there are people legislating from the bench, okay? Denying to hear or to see evidence just because of their political views, ignoring the Constitution. On the other hand, the legislative branch can abuse their power to raise taxes, they can abuse all sorts of things, and the president can abuse powers, right? And that's why checks and balances exist. Unfortunately, when you get too politicized and unconstitutionalized, we'll call it, you start to say, it's okay to abuse the power as long as it's doing what my party wants, right? And then you've just said, forget the Constitution, and you've allowed your enemy, your political enemy, to do the same to you, that which you did to them, okay? Excellent. All right, I look forward to seeing you on what day? Tuesday? Okay, and come back. I expect more people, okay? So if you see somebody in this class, you go, hey man, he's taking a room. All right, have a good day.